This is No Sex Please. I'm religious. In many parts of the world, people are dying and being killed because of who they are and who they love. If you want to support this podcast, please visit nosexplease.com.au and follow the donation links there. Jim Marjoram. How are you, Jim?
Fantastic. Very good, thank you.
This is great. Now, Jim, you and I have been friends on Facebook for quite a while, which means we're real friends, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. There's nothing quite like Facebook friends. Yeah.
Yeah. My daughter came up the other day and it said that I'd been friends with her for 14 years.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah.
It makes me wonder about all the years before that, because there are quite a few of them. You know,
well, most kids would probably agree with that. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, Jim, it's great to see you. You and I met when you were in Melbourne last time, and
it's great.
It was really lovely to see you and have lunch and have a good chat. Now, you're aware of the work that we do here with people who are LGBTQ in East Africa.
Yeah.
And all the sad and terrible stories of people desperate for support.
Yeah.
It's heartrending, and yet you live in a country and I live in a country which has become more inclusive, accepting, whatever words we want to do, adult and mature in regards to queer people. And we still need to grow more, of course. And you're doing some great work in that area yourself. So what I wanted to do is talk about your work and then relate it back to the situation, which is still bloody awful for people in many countries of the world. You started in work that is advocacy plus education, I guess.
Yeah.
Just feel free to tell me how it started, how you got involved, and what you do, because you do some amazing stuff.
Well, yeah. Basically, I didn't actually come out as gay until
I should say you're in the what do you call it, the real eastern area of Australia, aren't you?
Yes, the far east of Australia, yeah, New Zealand, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought I'd better cover that.
Yeah. I didn't come out until 2011. Previous to that, I had been sort of closeted gay my whole life, basically closeted, although I was very much in every form of ex-gay therapy on the planet, pretty much, and became a leader in Living Water's ex-gay movement in the 90s, late 90s.
So Living Waters was about the therapy, but also about renouncing. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was renouncing that the gay whatever lifestyle, you know, and I mean, there was a lot about that movement that really appealed to me because it was very centered around love and the Father heart of God and things like that, which really appealed to me. And my wife as well at the time, because she'd had some lesbian relationships. So we sort of, we worked in that. So even though I wasn't out, it was still known that I worked with Living Waters. And so that was the thing. But in 2010, my wife got cancer and she passed away in 2011. And it was at that point I just had to completely reassess my life from beginning to end. The whole thing. Began my deconstruction process. Came out as gay because obviously I'd realised that conversion therapy in any form just does not work. I was still just as gay as I ever was, but just happily in denial, you know. So
you didn't have trauma.
Yeah. Oh God, I had pretty much had a breakdown. So it was sort of doing about 12 months to sort of get my brain back into some sort of working order. And from there, I totally unraveled my faith, like why I believe what I believe. It started in the usual process for people who go through this, where we say, well, hang on, I was gay, but is it okay? Is it, and then you question what the Bible says and all the doctrines and theology around it. And then you find there's a whole different paradigm on how you interpreted that. And I went down the track of like, oh, if I got that so wrong, what else did I get wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, my whole faith began to unravel from that point on. But after a couple of years, I thought I really need to, with what I'd learned, even back then in my sort of naivety, I thought, no, I need to help or provide resources for other people in similar situations who had been closeted and silent within their faith or their religious groups or whatever, and help them to sort of just stop and look at why they believe that, why are they struggling with the whole God hates gays, LGBT people, and give them tools to sit back in safe, loving spaces where there wasn't any condemnation at all, and just really explore that whole area and find their own space in terms of spirituality and sexuality and gender, of course, in all that, and just really discover who they are without any of the assumptions of other religious expectations or whatever. Yeah, if that made any sense. Yeah,
It makes a lot of sense. So can we unpack a little bit more of the the deconstruction? So the challenges to your faith that revolved around your sexuality or the teachings about sexuality, and then how that led on from there.
Yeah, well, the first what hit me was the first thing was in New Zealand we have a guy, Professor Peter Lynham, who's a wonderful advocate. Christian guy, and he's wonderful for helping LGBTQ Christians understand the scriptures and the Bible and all that sort of stuff about being gay.
Yeah.
And I read some of his work and I thought, oh my goodness, how come I've never seen this before? So it was this sort of looking at what the Bible said in a whole different paradigm. So and just basic stuff like the words that are being translated as homosexual and things that were just totally wrong.
Yeah.
And context, the interpretations of the passages in Romans and so on, and what they actually meant in their cultural context at the time, all this sort of stuff. And it sort of added up to saying that, oh, this isn't really what I thought it was at all. And so I realized that it's okay. I'm actually, it's all about the loving of someone of the same gender. And so what I did from there was it started to click into my head that if I'm mistranslated and misinterpreted just those, what else have I been misinterpreting and getting so wrong?
Yes.
So yeah, that really started me to look at a lot of basic doctrines and things that I believed, and things like that we're inherently evil by birth, and all sorts of things about how we're regarded and our need for the type of salvation and that we've it was a very long and complex road, but it led me to a whole new understanding of spirituality and religion and the role of Christianity and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
So I note when I see your posts on Facebook and so on, I think we're on similar places, in our so. But so a lot of what you post tells me that you really don't believe in the miracle working God that you probably once believed in.
No, not at all. My entire concept of God has changed.
Yeah.
I now I find no support for the Abrahamic God in any sense. For me, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I don't make that statement lightly, because I actually lived as a passionate, born again Christian for over 40 years. I went to Bible college. I studied the Bible inside out. I had a massive library of Christian books, and you name it, I did it. I was gung ho. So it's not a light statement for me to say that despite all that, and all that I'd invested into it, and what I would have called my personal relationship with Jesus, which literally kept me alive all that time, I still got to the point where I just couldn't hang my hat on that whole Abrahamic concept of God anymore. It just didn't do it. These days I can see some gems in all that. Absolutely. Every religion has its
Preciousness.
Preciousness. That's right. Yeah. There's stuff all in there. But now I view it through a whole different lens. And I have a much greater peace with who I am. I no longer struggle with my place in life and the universe and all that sort of stuff. It's
So compare your struggles before, when you believed that being gay was wrong, the Bible taught you it was wrong, and all that sort of thing, and the struggles of your wife as well, because that's interesting that you had that shared place there with your wife, to the place you're in now. Because one thing that I think most religions teach is that you find peace, you find a place to belong, you find all those sort of things, joy, etc. So where are you now with that? I mean, you've already given me some indication there, but a bit more on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. I mean, the whole concept of community and that peace that you get as a Christian is very real, very compelling. And that's one of the reasons I think why we stay in it for so long is exactly that.
Yeah.
So there is a sense where, after I'd sort of unraveled so much of it, I no longer had a Christian community anyway. As actually, tragically, as my wife was dying, the Christian community around us was dreadful. Absolutely. They were useless. It was just the worst experience I'd ever been through. We felt totally abandoned. It was just dreadful.
Why?
They were patronizing. They were like, just keep praying, God's going to heal you, all this sort of stuff. And we're saying, yeah, this is great. Can we have some practical help? Thanks. We're really struggling. Can someone cook us meals? Like all this sort of stuff. Didn't happen. No, never happened. Well, one lady cooked meals for us, and after about 2 weeks, she was like, "Oh my God, it's such a sacrifice to do this," and we were like, "Oh, thanks. Okay, well, it's okay. It's all right. Don't worry." And the home group was just around the corner, and we're, my wife couldn't walk by this stage; she was in a wheelchair, and so look, how about once a month you have the meeting at our place? It'd be really nice. No, we can't move it. No, it's just that wouldn't. And it just got worse and worse.
Of course, I'm sure that is not typical, but I think one thing is typical. I mean, because there are good stories.
Absolutely,
Church communities really rallying. But I think the experience of, and it seems to be in fundamentalist faith, where people are unable to face reality. This person is dying. So how do we deal with that? It doesn't really help to say, "I'll come and pray for you,"
no.
or have faith in God. What's wrong with you? Your faith isn't good enough, or something. Bible verses. It's a lot of
Yeah, possibly if we were back, because we're in fundamentalist Pentecostal
mm,
churches,
yeah,
possibly if we'd been in the local Anglican church, it might have been a whole different story.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I would hope. I
yeah,
would
yeah,
hope that would be better in any church. But
yeah.
so
So,
so
yeah.
move on from there. Where do you find love, welcome, assurance, and support now? And could you imagine that journey with your wife differently?
Oh gosh. Well, now I have a small network of friends who have stood by me through thick and thin, and in a sense, that's my community,
Okay.
and I think I couldn't really ask for any more. There is a broader community. I know there's groups I work with, and the people in there. I know I could fall back on them if I ever needed to. There is a level there, but conversely, there is still that thing where the broader church community, and some of the churches I've been in through my life have been absolutely wonderful. Even one back in the early 90s, which was basically a cult. But despite that, the sense of community that we had was extraordinary. And some of them are still wonderful friends.
Mm,
And, we get together occasionally and it's just like no time has passed.
wow.
So, there is still quite nothing that replaces that I found. I don't know. I'm actually working on that with what I'm doing with Silent Gaze. I'm trying to establish some form of community that people can relate to. But yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Tell me about Silent Gaze and the birth of that and what it stands for.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I wanted to provide some level of resources for people who have been in similar situations to myself, and safe spaces where they can feel like it's okay to open up and share anything, any struggle that you've been through. So there's no condemnation, whatever it might be. So I started up Silent Gaze, and I have it's ended up over the years being mostly one-on-one stuff. I've got a Facebook private group where people are free to do, communicate whatever they want there. But I get a lot of one-on-one stuff. People email, message, one-on-one Zoom calls or face-to-face local ones, meet up in a cafe somewhere or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. And that seems to be where most people that I reach who have a heart for where I'm coming from,
Yeah.
they want that one-on-one thing, and I think perhaps a lot of them are very badly hurt, and to be in a situation that's a little more open and public can be a bit challenging for them. So but as I said, there's also a lot of people expressed a need to me for having more open community meetings and getting together. And so I did actually try starting that, but just before COVID, and, and that turned to custard. So never mind, but I'm going to try that again. The other area that I do, which is proving very powerful, is the workshops. So I've developed a sort of a meticulous breakdown of the process of looking at why we believe what we believe, and then the damage of things like religious abuse and conversion therapy. And I've structured it into a workbook, which I can then run into workshops. And I'm just about to start those up again as well. So, yeah, they've been. Yeah, it's called the core coming out of religious experience.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful. Um, I the need for all that is huge in Australia, in New Zealand, everywhere really.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, I'll be going to a men's. It's kind of like a retreat, I suppose, for a couple of days in a couple of weeks' time, which is part of CFMA, which is Centre for Men and Families Australia,
Mm.
and it was set up try and provide those safe spaces for men to be able to open up and talk and so on, and also address the terrible rate of suicide. And I was able to take a queer refugee who'd come to Australia there last year, and I was just amazed at the warm and loving welcome that he received from blokes in all kind of areas of community. And it's not religious based, even though it's sort of based on the teachings, shall I say, the humanitarian teachings of Richard Rohr. He was quite an amazing man. So, you know, we're on similar pages there. Now, you mentioned the United Nations representative earlier to me before we started recording. Where does that fit in?
So the Human Rights Commission in New Zealand, when they were presenting the bills over here to ban conversion therapy, I don't know how it happened, actually. I got involved in the media and about that whole thing, and I was on the panel consulting with the Human Rights Commission over here as to, you know, all the details and what was going on there. So I was very privileged in that respect. And it's been wonderful. They've set up a wonderful process in New Zealand. So if you've got any concerns, you think, if you've totally been abused, or even if you're not sure or you're confused about what's happened with conversion therapy in any form, you can call them, and they've got like a triage basically, and they're loving, wonderful people, and they'll guide you through the whole process of, like, do you just need counselling, or would you like some mediation, or is it bad enough that we should take legal action, whatever it might be, you know. So we have a really good process in New Zealand for that now. So it's great being
that is fantastic. Now, one of my fears, Jim, is that these gains that we have in, you know, New Zealand and Australia and other parts of the world could be turned back, as you know, the abortion issues was attacked in America, and then you look at some of the people that we deal with in East Africa, and we read about problems all around the world, Russia and so on, where very nosy people are concerned about what people do in their bedrooms or in their private lives, which is very hard to understand, to be honest. So what can we do to keep fighting this, to advocate for that? My small charity, Humanity in Need, Rainbow Refugees, stands up for people in East Africa, but I have a vision for it to grow so that we can, you know, argue for and represent people in all parts of the world. Nothing like having crazy big dreams. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's possible that all this stuff could be reversed and hatred could take over again?
Sadly, I think it possibly could. I mean, we've already seen it in Russia, for example. They were never great in terms of accepting LGBT, but it's just gone from bad to worse.
Yes,
and you get Uganda have really, again, they were never great, but now it's worse than it ever was. And but conversely, like Poland, for example, they turned really nasty, and now that's starting to roll back again, and there has been a change there. So yeah, it's possible. It is possible. I think it has to come from the groundswell of people, the actual people there. I mean, it helps if you had, if by some miracle, you know, the president or prime minister suddenly declared, you know, relief for the LGBT community. It'd be wonderful. But it really has to come from the groundswell, because no matter how much someone at the top says it's okay, it's the community that really, at the end of the day, says whether it's okay or not. So if you're in a community that is anti-LGBT to the core, it doesn't matter what the law says, they're going to they're going to make life dreadful no matter what. That's a tough one. That really is tough.
Yeah, it really is. I agree with you. Now, on a slightly lighter note, I did mention to you before about the previous interview, which was with Alex Liu, who is an Asian American young gay man, who produced a documentary about his own sex shame, his own issues in dealing with his own sexuality, but not only being gay, but sex shame generally, because he like so many other people had never been had proper teaching about sex. So there were so many things he didn't understand, and I always have the saying that if it's not discussed, it's disgusting. And if something's disgusting, then obviously there's a fair bit of shame with it.
Absolutely. So
I strongly recommend that documentary to folk, and also the interview with Alex, who was a very pleasant, intelligent man. The documentary's got a fair bit of humour in it, as well as he's very honest about dealing with himself. I think a very precious part of it is where he confronts his parents gently and talks to them about, why didn't you talk to me about this stuff? So it's really quite lovely, actually.
If I might share my own story there, because I was brought up with an English family, and that whole sort of you never talk about it sort of stuff. So there was never that freedom there. But what was so weird is later, after my dad had died, my mum was quite old, in her 80s, and I think it was her late 80s when I came out to her, and she was basically like, "Oh, that's nice, dear," and and she started to tell me about the lesbian couple that lived up the road from her when she was young, and then she told me about her and my dad's sex life, and I was like, "Okay, that's great, thanks, Mum." TMI. But it was lovely. Sort of made me realise if I'd actually been open when I was much younger, I think they would have been fine.
Yeah,
it's just that you didn't talk about it. You just don't talk about it. So
and that's the huge tragedy of the whole thing. Now, I want to ask you a particular question, and I want to sort of finish on this one. This is not something I've given you a warning of. I was going to, and I never got around to it. So you can choose not to answer, or you can end our friendship here. No, I'm concerned about the LGBTQ community, in that it seems to me, now I could be wrong, but I've had conversations with other people that the community doesn't seem to be very supportive of others in need. Now, I hate saying that, but I wonder whether part of that is because people have had, in Australia, New Zealand may be different, but when you've lived your life, if people have been out to a degree, right, then they've had to struggle, and even if they're not out, there's still this struggle that's there. And then you get to a point where you're able to, on LinkedIn, I'm part of a group that has something like 70,000 LGBTQ professionals. Wow. And it's a lovely group. I mean, people post selfies about themselves and, talk about the work that they're doing and so on. And being the age that I am, I look back and I think, God, people could never do that. Aside from not having social media,
right?
There's no way you'd put a sign on a signpost and say, look, I'm a gay man working in such and such.
Yeah.
So, am I right? So part of I didn't finish that. So I'm thinking to myself that all this hurt that people have come from, right? Does it now mean, well, I don't want to go in places where there is suffering. I don't want to know about people suffering. I just want to have time to enjoy my life and my friendships and my love relationships and so on.
Very much so. Yep. I think that's very much the case. I think because of, especially in the area I worked in with that religious abuse and religious trauma, it's too hard. It really is too hard. So for people who've come out of that whole area to actually go back in it and try to help people when they haven't really even addressed their own healing process. They've managed to come through it and they've survived, but there's still a lot of hurt in there, a lot of bitterness and all that sort of stuff. And to go back and help people again, it's too hard.
Yeah.
It really is too hard, too painful. And so I can understand that. And that's actually part of a lot of what I try to do with silent gaze in the workshops, is help people process all that sort of stuff and get to the point where they can feel comfortable helping others again. So but the LGBT community in general is it's a very difficult place to find the support that you need from people who are willing to walk with you. I mean, that's a generalization. There are some beautiful people. I have wonderful friends who absolutely stand by me. But there's also a level of shallowness in there where, you just play the game.
Yes.
And you just carry on. And meanwhile, somebody's just killed themselves. And they go, oh my God, I had no idea. And it's like, didn't you? Really? So we've got a ways to go there. Yeah.
We do have, and look, there's this, I don't ask this question to try and bring shame to anybody else. I mean, a dear friend of mine who came here as a refugee, has faced so much pain and suffering that he really doesn't want to know anything about his background.
Understandable.
He doesn't want to hear about other people's pain and suffering. He just wants to get on with his life. So I think that probably is something that you can share.
Absolutely. And I do respect that in people as well. So, it's...
Having said that, there are people that I wish I could help more. And I think of one, a couple of young people in Africa, one who is probably 28, and he's been trying to get to a safe place for 12 years. And we do support him. We provide rent and food and so on. And recently he asked me for help so that he could go on a trip there was some special trip being organised where they could go to the Kenyan nature reserves.
Oh, nice.
And so they went for 2 nights, and we were able to help him do that. And he said, this is the first time in my life I've had anything like this, so I'm really hoping that we can get him and others like him, either to Australia or New Zealand or America or somewhere where they can be reasonably safe.
It's a huge mission, because I support as best I can one guy over there. Yeah. But, I just think it's just one guy, and what can we do? At the end of the day, I think it just comes down to money.
I know.
It's just money. If we had enough money, we could probably do miracles over there, but...
Well, I've talked about, I mean, you're supporting one person, and when, humanity in need is supporting a few. We wish we could do more, but the dream we had originally was to have 1,000 people giving $10 a month.
Yeah.
You imagine what we could do with that. That's $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
So many.
And it's much, like the guy I'm supporting, he said, "Oh, can you just send me what was it, 75,000 Tanzanian shillings, which was like $50."
Yeah.
And, for me, okay, I can do $50 this week. That's my budget. For him, it was life-saving.
Oh, no.
It meant the difference between having water, having power, and all this stuff, being able to get food for the week, all that sort of stuff. And, I think, for goodness sake, if we all chipped in and just gave $10 a week, how many lives could we actually change? Absolutely. And as much as I hate to say it, a lot of the gay community are quite well off. Guys. Yeah.
So, folks, please help us if you can. And Jim, it's just been wonderful talking to you. And we'll do this again. And I look forward to the next time you come across to
either later this year. I'll be back.
Are you coming back to the mainland?
Yeah. Western New Zealand, yeah.
Didn't you? You came from Australia originally, didn't
I'm
you?
originally Australian, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So,
you know the terrible mistake that people always did with Tasmania. You know,
where? Uh,
people
Tasmania.
yeah, all right, all right. People would travel in Tasmania years ago. I don't know whether it still happens, and they'd go into well, in those days, they'd go into a post office to send a postcard, and they'd say, "How much does it cost to send a postcard to Australia?" Many years ago, I was in Sri Lanka on Australia Day with the organisation I was working with at the time, and we were invited to the Australian Embassy, with other people for a special thing.
Right,
And
right.
of course, they had this special Australian cake made in the shape of Australia without
Tasmania.
Tasmania.
Oh. Well,
And
look, I have to tell you this, there are maps of the world that don't have New Zealand on them.
oh yeah, I know. It's awful. Jim, thank you very much for your time today. Folks, there's links come up at the end of this. And so if you can help us in any way, I'd really appreciate that. You suddenly become a friend for life and a hero for life. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Thanks, David.
Okay, so now what I do now is... Some people around the world are giving money to spread messages of hate and to see LGBTIQ people marginalised, victimised, imprisoned and murdered. It's time for others to stand up and say enough is enough. Please support the work of this podcast, No Sex Please, Unreligious, and visit our website www.nosexplease.com.au to make a donation today.